Hey, Seth David here from the world-famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, bringing to you another special screencast. This time we're talking about extreme bookmarking, how to manage all of these apps. I talk to a lot of people and frankly see a lot of people struggle with this, and a lot of them say to me, I can't manage yet another app. And my thought is, what if you had a good system for managing all those apps? You know, one of the things that I do when I go to work on a client on any given day is I have a place to go for that client. And once I'm in that place, in a click, I can access all the different links I need to open up all the different apps that I typically use when I'm working with that, or for that matter, with any client, right? So there are a lot of apps that I use with every single client. So I want a quick reference system that lets me easily get to those apps anytime I'm working in a client. And I want to cut down on any kind of duplication. In other words, there are a lot of bookmarking systems where what I could do is just have a duplicate link to, for example, Google Drive, whatever it is. But that's not efficient. Especially if I need to update things. So I really want a system that's geometric in nature, where I can create a home for each thing that I need and then bring them or somehow link them together in some logical way. Now, the first thing I want to do, this is going to be a several part series, I think 6 or 7 parts by the time we're done. In this introduction, I want to address a specific use case. I've been moving over to Mighty Networks as an alternative to Slack. The main reason is that I've never loved Slack's organization. It's very one-dimensional. You have channels and you can have conversations in those channels. There really aren't other dimensions on which you can organize things in Slack, and I never liked that. And I've used Slack for a very long time. I've been in and out of probably every different feature it has. I've created automations. I know how to create the sections to group your channels in logical sections, and that's user-specific, which I was actually disappointed about because I would have liked to have known that I could create that organization and have it work for everybody, all my users in the Slack workspace. But I also see the benefit and the wisdom in letting each person kind of do their own. Either way, the point being, I'm very familiar with everything Slack can do, and I'm still not satisfied. Mighty Networks, by contrast, gives me a lot of dimensions on which I can organize things, and I really like that. So, plus, visually, I think it's much, much, much more appealing in the way I can lay things out. So without going into a whole Slack versus Mighty Networks thing, a little background. And the first thing I encountered really by way of downside in going to Mighty Networks was the fact that with Slack, I've got a desktop app where I can access all of my workspaces right there. In a click, I can hit Control-K, and I can type the first few letters of the name of a workspace, and boom, I'm off and running in that workspace. Very convenient, very quick to be able to reference the information or the location that I need to then go interact with my community, my client, whatever that might be. Mighty Networks doesn't have a desktop app. They do have a great mobile app, by the way, which does make it very easy to switch between networks. You just tap the little hamburger menu at the top left, and we'll bring up an image to show you what that looks like. And then you can tap an option that says Switch Networks, and then it'll give you your list, and you can tap into whichever network you need to go to next, right? So that was the conundrum. That was the first problem that inspired this very video and series, was how do I solve for that? And because a couple people brought it to my attention as though it was like some deal breaker, like, oh, you know, we can't really access Mighty Networks very easily across different networks. And I'm like, nope, that's not a deal breaker. You just need a solution for it. We need a system, right? We need a bookmarking system, not just for Mighty Networks, but for everything. Because as you're going to see, as I'm going to point out to you, yes, your Chrome browser bookmarks work great up to a point, but eventually you're going to need something more dynamic. And you're not going to put every single thing that you ever want to bookmark, including every article you want to read, in your Chrome bookmark system. It just gets too cluttered and clunky after a while when you start to do that. Trust me, this is why I started branching out beyond my browser bookmarks to come up with systems for these kinds of things. And since then, I've played with several apps and several systems, and that's why I want to show you about 6 or 7 different apps to give you choices in terms of which one you think will work best for you. So let's take a look at my screen. In this introductory video, we're just going to look at this Mighty Networks use case, and with all the systems sort of pre-built, I'm going to show you how I'd solve for Mighty Networks in each of these apps, and then over the next 6 or 7 videos after this one, we'll dive deep into each of these solutions and how you can set things up in the bigger picture for everything that you need to track, every app that you use with every client that you use, and even the stuff that you use internally for your own company or firm. Let's take a look at my screen, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So we'll start with Chrome. Of course, Chrome, very simple, very straightforward. I have my bookmarks bar, right? You can see I've got some stuff across there, and then I have subfolders within the bookmarks bar. Everything is organized in folders and subfolders. And as you can see, I created a folder called Mighty Networks Communities. You can see I've got a folder for the client-based ones that I've begun to build. And then here is my bookkeeping for real estate brokers. Owner Insider is Chris Brogan's network that I belong to. And then here's my own SethWorks network, right? So very simple and straightforward how you would organize this in Chrome. You just have your folder. If you want to group your clients separately, you can do that. I did this very intentionally because I do a lot of videos on things just like the one you're watching now, and I want to protect my clients' privacy. So sticking them in a folder like this enables me to illustrate what I'm illustrating right now without revealing who my clients are necessarily. Okay. The other thing that I did here, that it's not really part of Chrome per se, but it kind of ties in for me, is the notifications you're going to get from Mighty Networks. They can be plentiful, potentially. It can get noisy. So I created a system to cut down on the noise, but also give me the reminders that I need to jump in because, again, unlike Slack where I have the app that gives me those notifications, I don't have that here with Mighty Networks. Mighty Networks sends me emails, and if I'm using the mobile app, then I get the browser push notifications, that show up there. But I don't love mobile app notifications in general. I love the emails actually because I call them throwaway emails. Once I've used them to for their purpose, which is to remind me to go in and follow up, I can delete them. There's absolutely no need to keep them. So in Gmail, which as you can see is obviously what I use, I'll go into the settings. We'll go into filters and blocked addresses. I'm going to scroll all the way down because it's one of the more recent ones that I've created. There's SethWorks. I'll click edit, and it's flagging. Each network gets sends its notifications from a unique email address based on the name of your network at mn.co. So I create a filter based on anything that's sent from this email specifically. And then we create the filter. Now, this is entirely up to you, how you want to do it. What keeps me sober might get you drunk. I don't want it to skip the inbox. I want to see it in the inbox, but I do want to mark it as read so that bold unread email isn't constantly ringing my bell every time I open up the inbox all day. And I apply a label that I created called SethWorks, which you can see over here. I assigned a color to it, which is great because that way when they're in the inbox, I notice the colored label. It shows up. It catches my eye. And this is just for me. It's not as annoying to me as seeing it being in bold and unread. I can deal with that. And then when the time comes, I can click on the SethWorks label. If there were any notifications that I had not yet followed up on by way of emails, they would be here. All I really ever need is any one of them to click in, click over. Next thing I know, I'm in the SethWorks network. I can follow up on all those things. And typically, once I'm done with those follow-ups, I'll come back here and just delete the lot of them, right? So that is how I've created a workflow around managing those notifications for the Mighty Networks thing specifically. Next, Bublup. Bublup is a really cool app, as you can hopefully see right away. When I click on it, it's very visual. And that's one of the things I really like about it. It's what makes it different from all the other apps that you might use for this kind of thing, is the visual nature of it, which means, yes, you'll want to use sites like Pexels and Dreamstime or Adobe Stock so you can get royalty-free images that you can use on an unlimited basis so that you can create the visual experience if you're a visual kind of person that makes it really easy to identify what you're looking for. But here's the key. So let's say inside of here, inside my Nerd Enterprises, these are folders actually, I have some Mighty Networks networks. Well, here's what you do. I rely heavily on the search with an app like this. And if I type hashtag Mighty Networks, and spelling does count here, guys, sorry to say, it will come up with actually the two that I've set up so far, the SethWorks and the bookkeeping for real estate brokers. Now, get this. If I click on these, it will actually launch the network. It's not going to take me into where I have to then go click. If I want to access the actual bookmark that I created here in Bublup, I can click this icon here. Before I even click, as I hover over it, it gives me the whole path where it's located. It's in Home, then Nerd Enterprises Inc., Community, and Mighty Networks. And I'll click over there in this case because I don't want to launch it. I want to show you how I set this up real quick. So here's SethWorks, and if I edit this, what I did was very simply, in the description, put a thing called tags here and use the hashtag Mighty Networks. Taking a little bit of time to do something like this makes it very, very easy to find things very quickly later on. And the trick is to be consistent. The other thing is, these are very easy to edit. Again, we're dealing with Bublup, very visual. So when we're in the same edit screen, I can upload and replace the image with anything I want so that it's clear in 2 seconds or less exactly what this is and what it's for. Okay. Moving over to Airtable. So Airtable, and again, we're going to dive deep into all these and how they kind of come together, but just quickly, how do I solve for the Mighty Networks thing? Well, I've got client-wise Mighty Networks in here, right? I have my Seth David's Nerd Enterprises Inc. Mighty Networks. So as you can see, I just create the bookmarks for the different Mighty Networks in my bookmarking system, and I'll show you real quick how we can, create a view that gives me quick access to all of my Mighty Networks URLs. So I'm going to right-click this Everything view and duplicate it. This is how you create kind of a report in Airtable. We'll call it Mighty Networks. Okay, and then I'm just going to filter this very quickly for where the app or place is. Mighty Networks, and boom, instantly I've got that filter created. And actually from within this view, I can click the plus sign. It will automatically apply whatever needs to be here based on the filters I've created to create all the other Mighty Networks links that I need to create. And now I've got this view saved. It's like a report, so I can instantly access all of my Mighty Networks in a couple of clicks. Okay. The next thing we're going to show you here is the brain. Let me click on my home tab here to show you kind of from scratch where this goes. So up here in the search, again, this is what I love about the apps that I use is they're all really, really good on search, which by the way is why I love Google so much, because they're really good about search. That's kind of their thing, right? So let's go to Mighty Networks here, the root Mighty Networks thought. These are called thoughts in the brain. And I have mine configured by default to open up the URL if there's nothing on the notepad for that thought. So you can see it's going to the main host's feed. So when you host a network on Mighty Networks, you get invited to join their community for hosts, which is a great resource for you to learn how to run and manage a community in Mighty Networks. As you can see, I've got client networks and then my communities. So I'll click on this one. I've got owner insider, which is where the one I belong to. That's Chris Brogan's. This is my own real estate broker network. This is my own SethWorks network. What I love about the brain is if I now click on the real estate broker one, now I'm sort of tapping into all the stuff that I've sort of bookmarked in relation to the real estate broker community. Okay, and so it's much more geometric in the brain. I can easily now link this. In fact, this should be linked to the real estate course. I thought it was. Let me check on one thing here. Real estate. Okay, so we want bulletproof bookkeeping with QuickBooks Online for real estate brokers. And this should be connected to the Mighty Networks thought. So watch how easy this is. From here, I'm going to click and drag down. There's the recent thoughts that I've been on. There's the real estate broker community. That should absolutely be part of this. So again, it's the same thought. It's not a copy of a thought in two different locations. It's the same thought that's now referenced from two different points because there's two different ways that I might want to get to this. Again, we're going to deep dive more into this later on in the series. For now, I just want to show you how I'm using each of these apps to solve for my Mighty Networks conundrum. And then we'll dive deep into each of these apps and each of the other videos and write-ups for this series. So what's next after the brain? Let's take a look at ClickUp. Back over to here. In ClickUp, it's a very similar system to what you see in Airtable, but if you're already doing a lot of things or everything in ClickUp, then it makes sense to use this system instead of using Airtable just for something else. That's one case where I'll say it's kind of silly to go use another app unless you just love Airtable that much, in which case, have at it, right? But what you'll see I did here, very similarly, this is a view that's similar to what we were initially looking at in Airtable, right? And for the app or place, I'll just sort by this real quick. Okay, I'm already sorted by task name, so let me remove that. Boom, and then I can scroll down. So you can see I've got my two Mighty Networks so far that I've included here. And again, you can add more and more. And again, we're going to dive deep into this later on, so you'll see how we can carve up different views that will enable us to focus on the specific details within this that we might want to access at different times for different reasons. Finally, for now, we have Notejoy. Notejoy is your sort of Evernote killer, right? So I used Evernote years ago. It got too clunky. It was trying to be too many things for too many different purposes, and I was overwhelmed, and I got out of Evernote, right? Notejoy comes in, and I love Notejoy. It's actually really good on collaboration if that's important to you. So here's how I'm going to suggest you could use Notejoy for something like this. Similar to what we saw in Bublup, we're going to use tags, okay? And as you can see, when you put a hashtag on anything, Okay, so if I go down here to Seth Works, I just, in the body of the note, you can also put it in the title, I've got tags bookmarks and mighty networks. As soon as I do this, Notejoy recognizes that. If I hadn't already had the tag in there in another note, it adds it. And now I can easily cross-reference things. So all my mighty networks, I can have a different note for each client's mighty networks network in that client's notebook, which might be here under Nerd Enterprises under clients, right? But then I can click on the mighty networks hashtag and get a cross-indexed view of all the different mighty networks so that if I just know I need to access mighty networks and I don't want to go drilling all the way into that client's stuff, I can just click here on mighty networks and I'll have a note that I can use the search to filter it further, but I can easily find this stuff, whatever I'm looking for, using Notejoy for this kind of purpose. So there you have it. That's how I would solve for this using the Mighty Networks conundrum. So is it a little more clunky than having one app with all of the workspaces? Absolutely. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not. You just need to have a system for it. And I've shown you 6 different ways to have a system in 6 different apps potentially for how to handle something like this. So for me, ultimately, because there are so many benefits to me for using Mighty Networks that I prefer over Slack, it was worthwhile for me to come up with a system for handling the one drawback that I've seen so far, which is that I can't easily jump between different workspaces. Well, now I've got 6 different ways that I can set up for myself to be able to easily jump between different workspaces. And one other thing on that point, and then I'll end, is if I open up a new computer, if I buy a new computer, and I log into Slack, I have to re-log into every one of those workspaces. Some of my Microsoft Teams friends have criticized Slack on that. Well, with a system like this and using Mighty Networks, I don't have that issue. I can throw this computer away, take out another one, log into whichever of these services I'm using, and I've got my setup all there. Nothing has to be logged into again. In like 30 seconds, I can be up and running in whatever I need to be up and running in using any of these systems in any of these apps, because every single one of them is a cloud-based app. That's it, my friends. So stay tuned and look for the next part of this series where we're going to do the deep dive into Chrome next, and then we're going to go through each of these apps in a deep dive in terms of how to set up these systems that I've just shown you for this one use case in a way that you can address all use cases that you could ever have with respect to keeping track of your bookmarks and all the different apps that you need to use and where you need to use them and which ones you need to use together. Everything like that. We're going to cover it in each of these different apps so you can have your choice. You can reach into your toolbox and decide which tool you want to use for this purpose.